And we're back again with Joel C. Rosenberg. Now, Joel, in the first half of the hour, you were telling us about your father, your parents, coming to know Jesus as Messiah, you coming from Jewish heritage, Orthodox Jewish heritage. Then take us then the next step to your own personal discovery of Jesus as Messiah.
Well, it really happened because of my parents. I mean, the Lord could have worked in a lot of different ways, but in my case, as I began to see my parents change, it was quite dramatic for me. My father had a volcanic temper that began to soften, and he began to be a peaceful, friendly person, and I was benefiting from that quite a bit. Not that he'd been a horrible dad before that, but this was different. And the only difference in his life was that he'd accepted Jesus as the Messiah, so I was making a correlation there. My mom had almost paralyzed personality with fear, just anxiety. She was changing. So eventually, now my problem was that they began taking us to a church, and I was in a Sunday school class. I didn't know anything. I mean, I didn't know the Bible. They used to do these things called sword drills. They make the kids hold up the Bible and say, "Ready, everybody, try to find John 3:16." Yeah. And I'm like, John? Who's John? I met the kids in this class. I don't know who. I would always lose. But if you won, you got a wiffle ball set. And I always wanted to win the wiffle ball set. And so my parents had given me a New Testament with Psalms and Proverbs in the back. And so one day they said, "Ready, what's the last book of the Bible?" And I'm like, oh. I said, oh. Everyone was shocked that I was raising my hand because they'd never seen that happen before. And they thought either this is going to be quite insightful or it's going to be very funny. And I said, "The last book of the Bible is Proverbs." And everyone started breaking out laughing. And I said, "What are you talking about? It's right there." But amazingly, as I began to get to know, as I listened carefully, and as I saw my parents change, as I started to read the scriptures, I came to believe that Jesus is in fact the Messiah. You know, the interesting thing is that because my parents had made such a dramatic change, that didn't seem so dramatic to me. It was important. What was really dramatic was that when I was in 5th grade, my father was teaching a 6th grade Sunday school class. Because they said, "Len, you're Jewish, you probably know the Old Testament, right?" And he's like, well, I know it more than 6th graders do. So they said, "Great, why don't you teach that class?" There was a little girl in that class who kept asking him, she was so just fascinated with him being Jewish. What's it like to be Jewish? What does that mean to be Jewish? Did you celebrate the holidays, the Jewish holidays when you were growing up? Did you celebrate Passover? And he said, "Yes, of course, every year." She said, "Well, can we celebrate Passover as a class?" And not being able to think of an answer, why not? He said, "Well, okay." So he comes home from church that day, and we're having lunch, and he said, "We're going to have a Passover Seder in my class." And I said, "A what?" And he described what a Passover Seder is, the ritual meal that you have to celebrate that historic thing.
To that point, you hadn't grown up with any religious background, Jewish or Christian.
Well, now we were starting to have some Christian background, but this was the key. I said, "Well, Dad, why would you know how to do a Passover Seder?" And he said, "Well, because I'm Jewish." I said, "You're Jewish?" I mean, does that mean I'm Jewish? I mean, this had not come up.
Wow.
My father had such a contentious relationship with his parents growing up that Brooklyn, parents, Orthodox Judaism, he just left that all behind. You know, he'd come to know Jesus as the Messiah, but it had taken a while for him to kind of rediscover how he could be Jewish and believe in Jesus. And it's really that little girl who began to set into motion in my family, starting to talk about these things. And once I began to realize, not only am I Jewish, but I believe in Jesus, and that's a unique thing, because there weren't that many Jewish believers in Jesus in the early 1970s. And we began to process, well, why have we been blessed this way? And what unique responsibilities do we have to share the gospel, not just with Gentiles, but with fellow Jews?
Now, Joel, let's jump forward then to the point where you started getting interested in politics, and you got even to the point of being advisor to Benjamin Netanyahu, as well as being involved with Steve Forbes in his presidential bid in 2000 and so on. Where did the whole political thing start to enter your life?
Well, I had always been interested in politics. I sort of had 2 tracks. I had my spiritual track, I had a political track. Actually, there was a 3rd one too. I actually majored in filmmaking in college. Why? Because I wanted to make documentary films, work on news programs, and be a journalist, and from a documentary side of it. But the bottom line was, I fell in love with a girl in college. We got married. We moved to Washington, D.C. I thought I was going to get a job at CBS News, NBC, the Washington Post, something. I got a job at a think tank that deals with foreign policy. And just over the next 11 years or so, one job led to another, and I began to serve as a low aide and then increasingly higher for these various political leaders. The truth is, Ron, that I'm a failed political consultant. I helped Steve Forbes lose 2 presidential campaigns. I was hired to be part of Benjamin Netanyahu's comeback campaign. Now, as of this moment that we're taping these shows, he has not yet come back. He's well ahead in the polls in Israel. He hasn't called me back to help him, and he's probably better off for that. Natan Sharansky, the deputy prime minister of Israel, I worked with him. He got so fed up with politics, he just retired completely. So it was a great experience working with them and for them and seeing the world through all of their eyes and their advisors and getting to be immersed in that world. But by January 2001, I concluded I don't really think being a political consultant is my future. I think God has something else for me, and I was praying, Lord, what is that? Because having a whole list of more people that I've helped lose, I don't know if that's such a fun thing to do, is it? Don't you have something more useful for me than that?
So then you shifted gears a little bit, and you kind of pursued a dream, a lot, I guess, where you always wanted to write either screenplays or novels or something. And so you actually sat down to write your first novel.
That's right.
That's when kind of things started to get really interesting, further interesting in your life. So maybe we just start on that, then we're going to have to finish this story tomorrow.
All right.
But about writing the novels.
Well, I'll give the teaser. The first page of the first novel I ever wrote, The Last Jihad, I began writing it in January 2001. The first page puts you inside the cockpit of a jet plane hijacked by radical Islamic terrorists coming in on a kamikaze attack mission into an American city. Now, this is 9 months before September 11th, 2001, and as the story of The Last Jihad unfolds, my fictional American president finds himself in a war with Saddam Hussein over terrorism and weapons of mass destruction. And I was literally finishing that novel on the morning of September 11th in Washington, D.C., in our home 15 minutes away from the major airport there, where at that moment, Flight 77 was being hijacked, turned around, flown over our house and into the Pentagon. I did not set out to write a novel that was going to foretell 9/11, but The Last Jihad was so close. There's differences, and we can talk about those in tomorrow's show, but there's differences in it, but it was so conceptually real to life and almost predictive that when the novel came out, it became a huge New York Times bestseller, hit #1 on Amazon.com, and got people asking me, what do you know about the Middle East that maybe we ought to know, because you seem to have some inside track.
And how did you ever arrive at such a conclusion? And we'll find out tomorrow how there's actually some scriptural basis to why you kind of backed into that story.
Yeah.
And so we'll look forward to hearing from you on that tomorrow. But Joel, it's so great to have you up here.
That's an honor. I appreciate it very
much.
In
Canada. We are seen across the U.S. as well. But we want you to get a copy of Epicenter, and you find out why the current rumblings in the Middle East will affect your future. And so you can find out how you can get your copy, and we'll see you again tomorrow with Joel Rosenberg.